The Hawker Hunter, arguably the best proportioned and most beautiful fighter aircraft ever designed. Now, this particular prototype Hunter at the Aerospace Museum at Cosford enabled the famous test pilot Neville Duke to smash the world airspeed record back in 1957 when he hit 727 miles an hour. It's the lessons learned from the aircraft industry and from the wind tunnel that have given Vauxhall the chance to build the sleekest four-seater passenger car in the business. How have they done it? Well, the aircraft engineers discovered years ago that it's vitally important how the air exits a shape. And you can see how the Vauxhall engineers have taken at least 2 inches off from the wheel arches. The rear screen is much narrower than you'd expect, and that contributes to the classic teardrop shape for ultimate aerodynamics. At the side they've got skirts, which gets you as close to ground effect as you can get in a production car. The other thing the aircraft engineers discovered, it's very important how the nose penetrates the air. Now, the distinctive shape of Calibra owes a great deal to this very low nose. They've achieved it through the use of headlamps that are only 2.75 inches in depth, and they've integrated the whole of the bonnet, the headlamps, the bumper, the spoiler, and most important of all, the undertray into one smooth moulding. Now, that gives Vauxhall a world-beating drag coefficient of 0.26, but that only applies to the 8-valve car. Most Calibras will be the more powerful 16-valve version. There they need a lot more cooling air, and they've opened up this grille, and that pulls the drag coefficient up to 0.29, about the same as a normal Cavalier. It's an example of the sort of artistic license that gets the marketing men a bad name and for which car manufacturers are notorious. Ford, of course, pioneered the market for coupes in Europe with the appearance of the Capri back in 1969. It was loosely based on Ford's highly successful American Mustang, and it was promoted as the car you've always promised yourself. The Capri was never that successful in rallying. Ford preferred to use the Escort or the Sierra, but GM had a different approach. Their Manta coupe enjoyed great success on the world rally scene until it was eclipsed by the four-wheel drive opposition. By 1987, both the Manta and the Capri were long in the tooth, and Ford were worried about the size of the coupe market, so they scrapped the Capri, while in the same year, GM gave the go-ahead for their Manta replacement, the Calibra. And if the demand so far is any indication of the future, GM were right and Ford was wrong. Vauxhall reckon on selling 5,000 Calibras by the end of the year, and that's more than the current best-selling coupe, Toyota's Celica, can manage in a full 12 months. So, if the product is right, the market is there, and Vauxhall have no intention of diluting the image of Calibra with cheap, low-powered versions, as Ford did with the Capri. But are the Calibra's good looks backed up by good handling? Well, on the track, I found high-speed cornering didn't give the sort of confidence I expected. But on the public road, it's different. It's hardly a sheep in wolf's clothing. The performance is pretty good. 0 to 60 around 8 seconds, and Vauxhall claim a maximum speed close to 140 miles an hour. Nice gearbox, positive change, and the driving position is good. I can get quite comfy in here. The seat's adjustable for height and rake, although we did manage to snap off the knob that adjusts the backrest. Ride and handling is very much as you'd expect for a car based on the Cavalier floor pan. It's a determined understeerer, and at high speed it's not quite as precise as you might wish. When you pull away from a T-junction, it's all too easy to get excessive wheel spin if you use a little bit too much throttle. Trouble with coupes like this, there's no room usually in the back seats. But sitting in the back of the Calibra, you've got to say there's plenty of leg and elbow and head room. You could contemplate taking 4 adults on quite a long journey in this car. I suppose I'd better get back to steering it. With the seat at the bottom of its height adjustment, there's adequate headroom for me, but there's a sunroof fitted as standard. Now, when you open it, the panel actually goes outside the car, and that saves those precious few inches. The one serious shortcoming is ventilation. Like many streamlined cars, there's no through flow of air, and the only way to get that is to have the fan on full almost all the time. Perhaps these sloping windscreens allow an awful lot of sunlight in here. It gets very hot and stuffy. In fact, in town, the only answer is to open a window. Now, a consequence of this sharply raked windscreen is that the pillar is some 3.5 inches closer to the floor than it would be in a standard Cavalier, and I'm always bashing my shoulder as I get out of the Calibra. I'm sure I get used to it. What I wouldn't get used to is this very sharp point on the quarter light, and when you're bending down quickly to undo the bonnet, for instance, I'm sure you only poke your eye out once on it. Under the bonnet is Vauxhall's well-proven 2-litre twin-overhead camshaft engine. It's in 16-valve form here, developing 150 brake horsepower, the same unit that's used in the Astra GTE and the Cavalier 2-litre GSI. Only real difference looking down at the engine compartment is that you can't see the road, and that's because of the aerodynamic undertray. At the back, this enormous rear door occupies fully a third of the length of the car. It reveals an adequately big boot, nice little storage compartments either side, not very deep, and the space-saver tyre lives under the boot floor. Split rear seats which fold down to give an average capacity for the class of car. Now, we often complain about high loading sills on Top Gear. This time we really aren't joking. You've got to pick a heavy load up an awful long way to clear and get into the boot. So overall, the Calibra is a fascinating marketing exercise. It's a very well specified car. I'm absolutely delighted to see anti-lock brakes as standard right across the range. If you're looking for the ultimate in handling, well, it might be better to wait for the four-wheel drive version that comes out later on this year. But Calibra is all about style. Now, the interior may look very much like a standard Cavalier, but the outside shape is absolutely stunning. It's going to do wonders for Vauxhall's image. So in summary, the Vauxhall Calibra 16 valve scores well for its very stylish shape, the low drag body which gives good fuel economy, and it's a genuine four-seater. On the debit side, the handling at the limit